Hello, everybody. Welcome to a special episode of the Forbidden Land podcast. This episode is about a cold case from the city of Noonan in Georgia. And I want to do this episode a little differently from the others. This will be me reading off information that I've written down. I'm using multiple sources to go over this, and the subject matter is also very sensitive. I'm sure I've already put a viewer discretion warning up, but I will reiterate verbally that if the topic of the homicide of a teenage boy or missing cases or anything of the sort make you uncomfortable, I fully understand if you can't watch or listen to this. So, this is the case of Blake Chappell. Around a year ago, I talked about this, but I felt like I didn't do it enough justice, and I was very unorganized while making that episode. So this one will be the complete redo of what that one was supposed to be. I will be using multiple sources, some sources which lay out a timeline, some are opinionated, and so I've attempted to cut as much of that out as possible, because the only opinion I want to know is the opinion of the police department and the opinion of the mother. And I will give my own opinion, so in a way it's a little hypocritical, but that's the whole point of this episode, is to talk about this case, talk about the possible outcomes, talk about if there's any updates, and then I will give you what I personally have concluded from this case. And I want to hear what you guys think as well, but if you have any knowledge on this case by the time you're done hearing it, like if you know anything about it, let the Noonan Police Department know. So this is the case of a 17-year-old boy named Blake Chappell, who lived in Sonoya, Georgia, and attended a high school in Coweta County that was in the eastern side of the county. He was 17 years old, and this story starts on October 15th, 2011, for the school homecoming dance. He had met a girl named Ryan, and the plan was that they would go to Ryan's house after eating dinner, and then go to the dance, and then come back to her house, and he would be picked up by his mother. And that is where the timeline starts for right now. So, after the mother of the girl took him out for dinner, they went back to her house, Blake and the girl did, and Ryan, and they started watching a movie, and eventually went to the homecoming dance. After the dance, they went back to her house, and the plan was that Blake's mother, Melissa, would come and pick him up from her house. He would end up calling his mom, and or contacting his mother and saying, or requesting rather, to spend the night at his friend Austin's house. Austin only lives a few minutes away, and this, according to the mother, this made her nervous, because this was the first time he had wanted to stay at a friend's house since they moved to where they lived during this part of the story. And so he goes over to Austin's house, and at one point they sneak out and go to a convenience store to try to buy cigarettes, and the store is closed. So they're unsuccessful. And he goes back to Austin's house with them, and eventually he decides that he wants to sneak out and sneak into his girlfriend's house. You know, typical teenage antics. Pretty standard for a teenager story. And at this time, I will be playing a portion of the Voices for Justice podcast, one of the sources I am using for this story. And this is the mother giving a theory on her thoughts on a possible second friend being present at Austin's house. Now, this will be relevant for later, The theory is that this unidentified friend, we don't really know who he is. We don't know what his involvement is in the case. We've only ever heard about Ryan and Austin, never the mention of this second friend at Austin's house. And so I will be playing a portion of the Voices for Justice podcast so you can hear what Melissa Chappell has to say about it. I don't believe that's her name anymore. So I will retract that. I will just call her Melissa from here on out.
The condition that they cannot leave Austin's house for any reason. Blake agrees and tells his mom, "I love you and I'll see you tomorrow." From here, Ryan's mom drives him to Austin's house. It seems like Blake and Austin just kind of hang out for a while, but at some point they do sneak out of the house and walk to a nearby convenience store in hopes of buying some cigarettes. Luckily, the store is closed, so they can't even try to buy them underage. And they just walk back to Austin's house. Now, Melissa told me that one of the big mysteries in her son's case is that there was a possible second friend at Austin's home that night with him and Blake. She told me that Austin's mother told her about this second boy at the home. They believe his name is Tavis, like Travis without the R. But she says she can't find any official information about this kid anywhere.
Austin's mom told me that the kid's name was Travis. But it turns out, later on, I found out his name was Tavis. Now, I don't know this kid's last name, but I really would like to know if anyone knows who this person is, and can confirm, that he actually was there that night, because the police don't mention it. Even though it was mentioned in the very beginning to me between Austin Harmon's mother and I, it's never been included in anything else. And I really don't understand why.
So that is Blake's mother going into detail about a potential second friend being at the home. And it is a little strange. This is something I didn't really know about until after I made the first episode on this. And definitely, all this new information I received definitely warped my view of this case and what could have possibly happened. Before, it seemed like not simple, but it seemed a little easier to be able to craft theories around what the possible, what could have possibly happened this night. But with the introduction of a second friend and many more details that are introduced, like the jacket that Blake is wearing when he gets to Ryan's house is not the same jacket he was wearing when he left Austin's house, according to Austin and Ryan comparing their stories. It's details like this that are sort of overlooked and either play a big role or don't play any role at all. And it's one of those things where, like, the second friend might have might have zero relevance to the story, but the fact that he's not really mentioned anywhere outside of Melissa's own accounts and other people close to the story, it's very weird. It's very weird that the second friend is ruled out so quickly, but Austin is so deeply involved in the story. So around 2 a.m., I actually do have the official timeline. So around 2 a.m., Blake decides... I'm scrolling to it, sorry. Oh, so around 12 a.m. is when they decided to walk to the gas station. Now, on the map, the gas station is not super far from where Austin lives. So in this particular neighborhood, there's something called the Market Square. And it's an area with a bunch of shops and restaurants and whatnot. So his house is not very far. And so I'll show you right now what the map looks like. So this blip down here is Austin's house. And this street, this is probably roughly like a 10-minute walk at most to this gas station over here. And this gas station does play a role later in the story. So at around 2 a.m., he decides that he's going to leave Austin's house and go to Ryan's house and sneak in. Typical teenage stuff. According to this, Austin reportedly gives Blake a key to the house along with a jacket so he could be warm on his walk. At this time, Blake was wearing black pants, a white t-shirt, and Austin's jacket. So around like 4:30 in the morning, I think that's actually the approximate time that's given on the reports. At 4:30 a.m., Blake gets to Ryan's house and he sneaks in, and I think Ryan's grandmother catches him. Now, Ryan reports that Blake was wearing black pants, one of his sweatshirts, a white hoodie with the brand Aeropostale on it, written in brown, which was not the jacket that Austin had given Blake. I might have mixed up my names there previously. Sorry about that. Blake was wearing black pants and a sweatshirt that had a brown Aeropostale logo on it. The sweatshirt's white. This is not the same jacket that Austin gave to him. They talked a little bit, talked about plans to hang out later in the day. And at around 5 a.m., the grandmother catches Blake in the room, and Blake eventually just leaves the house. If you're wondering what the map looks like, I will pull it up now. I made these sketches a long time ago. 3 years ago, wow. So, here are the maps. Right here is, in this rough area, is where Ryan's house is. So he walks from here, this area, all the way down this way, along this road. According to all the reports, it's along this road, not this one. Despite being found on the creek down here eventually, he walked along this road, came down this one on Mary Freeman, took a right, and went to Ryan's house over here, where the end of the red line is. It's somewhere in here. It's either right here or right here. And when he runs off, he goes back down this exact route. Here is the last known location that we can kind of assume he was at. He was either here or here, because he says in his text messages he's on a bridge. Here would make a bit more sense for what's about to happen, but here would line up with the text messages. So around 6 in the morning, he's, during this whole time he's texting Ryan. And around 6 in the morning, he says that he's near a bridge, and then he's being pulled over by police. Now, this is a crucial detail. The Noonan Police Department says they have no record of ever pulling over Blake, of ever stopping him or anything. There are zero records of a cop stopping an individual to question them. And so this raises a lot of questions, and I will come back around to this. So, don't worry. I will elaborate further on this line. So the last text he sends is that it's cold outside. And around this time, around 7 a.m., the same gas station from earlier, a clerk that works for that gas station reportedly says that they saw Blake around 7 a.m. And there's been conflicting reports. The Quick Trip says that they spotted him around 9:30. The police don't really subscribe to that idea, and it seems that it would be fairly, not impossible, but it would be very difficult to line up Blake's whereabouts to the Quick Trip. It's so far away from the rest of the case. Here it is right here. And down here is the route that Blake would have been on. And here's the last known sighting of him, around 6:30 to 7 in the morning. That is a big stretch. On foot, that is around a 2-hour walk. So the timing almost lines up. However, it is probably unlikely that he would have ended up at this Quick Trip unless he was kidnapped by someone and brought there. So that's the entire timeline from that day, for the most part. Austin and Ryan and their families eventually start to go look for him. Melissa searches for him. The police do a search. There's nothing coming up. They can't find him. They've canvassed the whole area. On December 19th, 2011, the Noonan Police Department is informed that a body is floating in the creek. And I'll show you that photo now. Not the body, of the creek that he's found in. Jesus. Here's a photo of the creek that he would have been reportedly found in. According to a lot of sources, around here is where he was possibly found. But this is the entire creek area that I've been informed of being the possible location of where his body was found. The state that his body was found in was he was stripped of everything except for his underwear. No phone was ever accounted for. No backpack was ever accounted for. He did have a backpack on him. And we know that because Austin reported that a backpack was never seen in his room afterwards. So if Blake had a backpack, it wasn't on him when he was found. No phone, no clothes, nothing. The cause of death was a gunshot wound to the head, and it was immediately ruled a homicide. The police determined that he was only in the creek for at most a week, but there have been conflicting opinions on this, that due to the cold weather and the fact that he was found in a body of water, that could have slowed the rate of decomposition, thus meaning it's possible he was in that water for a month. So a week to a month, but that would rule that he was not killed the night that he went missing, or the morning that he went missing. And so that was where the case stood for about 10 years. Now, before I get to recent developments, let's go back in time. In May 2021, Blake had just split apart from his girlfriend. His ex-girlfriend decides she's going to run away from her home, from her trailer in Jonesboro. Blake also lived in Jonesboro. He eventually found his ex, brought her back to his home, and called the proper people. The stepfather of the ex shows up and proceeds to beat Blake up. Earl Jones is apparently the guy's name. I hope that's correct. This is on the article, so this is an article that I'm reading from. This is on May 28th. The stepfather shows up. He reportedly punched Blake in the face, knocking him off his bike, then proceeded to kick him in the head and ribs, with multiple witnesses seeing this. Bizarrely, the police arrest Blake for custodial interference on June 2nd, 2011. And then they set his bond at $2,500. He makes bail. The police release him after he gets the money together on June 18th, and his court date was scheduled for October 24th, 2011. What a bizarre event that this boy with close connections to a troubled girl, he finds her, brings her to his house, keeps her there for the time being, and alerts the proper people to come and pick her up. And after all that, the stepfather then beats the shit out of him, and then Blake is arrested. Insane. That's one of the most frustrating and bizarre parts of this entire story to me. So right after this incident, Blake and his mom, Melissa, pack everything up and they immediately move to Sonoya, Georgia. And she tells her son, you cannot talk to any of your friends back in Jonesboro. She basically didn't want anyone in Jonesboro to know where Blake ended up. And apparently from the assault, according to this article, he developed selective mutism. And they started a new life in Sonoya, Georgia. Now, fast forward to the day that he went missing. According to some sources, the stepfather at one point in time had called the family, Blake's family, and posed as a police officer. Take this with a grain of salt. This is, this is alleged, and someone unconfirmed, but it is something that I've read in multiple accounts of this story. And so that brings us back to the quote-unquote police that stopped Blake the night or the morning that he went missing. Now, according to the Newnan PD, they've ruled out the stepfather as a suspect. That has upset a lot of people. It's possible they just didn't have enough evidence. According to them, he had a pretty tight alibi. So, that's all we can really say about that part of the story. Now, let's cut back to Voices for Justice and listen to what the mother has to say about her son eventually being found in the creek in December.
Came and went, and his charges were ultimately dropped without Blake resurfacing. Melissa told me that she spent much of the first few weeks just sitting, waiting by her home phone for Blake to call. That call would never come. But 5 weeks after Blake goes missing, Melissa receives a call from someone she thinks may have been involved in Blake's disappearance.
But I did receive a phone call, and I answered, and I could hear a TV playing in the background on very low, but no one would say anything. And it sounded like, with the sound of the echo, it just sounded like somebody had been standing like in the kitchen or maybe between two adjoining rooms, just listening. And and never would say anything. And I just kept saying, Blake, until I just couldn't handle it anymore. I ended up disconnecting the line.
Ultimately, Melissa is...
So that's a pretty horrifying piece of the story. And, adds more to the theories that have formed around the potential outcome of this case. In October 2021, so this is 10 years later, the Newnan Police Department releases a new bulletin with 7 unsolved cold murder cases. This includes Carl Smith, Carlos Barber, Blake Chappell, Reginald Sinkfield, Eric Smith, Alzuavion Martin. I'm sorry if I butchered that. I don't know how to pronounce that name. And James Petty. Obviously, Blake Chappell's is the one that we're talking about today. But they released this bulletin because it's the 7 coldest cases that they have. And also to renew interest in these cases. The oldest case on this list, Carl Smith, is from 1997. Following that is a case from 2003, and then after that is Blake's case from 2011. So this renewed interest in the case, and it was the first time I had heard about this case. And this case was circulating, and I ended up researching it a decent amount. And I ended up finding a bunch of forum posts about it, people saying it was a really odd kind of case. It's around the time that I started researching this entire thing. So for about 3 years now, this case has been something I've thought about, something that's bothered me. When I was a kid, I used to drive through this area. I had a couple friends that lived in the neighborhood that he went missing in. All of it disturbs me. And on March 21st, 2024, the Newnan Police Department executes search warrants on multiple locations regarding the Blake Chappell case. These search warrants were executed on an area off a stretch of highway. These were executed on March 20th. The article was released on March 21st. On March 20th, the Beaver Creek community in Sharpsburg, Georgia, was suddenly approached by NPD with search warrants for residences in the back of the neighborhood. They set up crime scene tape surrounding a wooded area and then left for the day. According to the Noonan-Coweta scanner traffic, they said that the department executed 2 warrants, each at a separate resident. The first residence off Beaver Creek Lane seems to have been the focus of the investigation, while the second residence, only a few miles away, off Sturgis Run. Timing indicates that the warrants were executed at the same time, indicating a possible link between the 2 residences. The next day, the Noonan-Coweta Scanner website runs another article with more information and photos, which I will show in just a moment. They gave more updates. The NPD confirmed that efforts to investigate the homicide continue. Detectives with the NPD served 3 search warrants at individual locations in the Sharpsburg area. The detectives recently identified new leads and information regarding the homicide investigation. The additional info led the detectives to apply for search warrants in 3 locations and resulted in the collection of evidence, which will be sent to the GBI. That is what the article says. Some suspects were removed from the list of persons of interest. 1 person of interest was voluntarily interviewed by the NPD that day. Nobody's been arrested, and the investigation is active. They were in the area using metal detectors. They were seen searching woods behind one or more of the locations located off Beaver Creek Lane. The photos were provided by a resident, seemed to confirm and show officers working in a stand of trees that has been roped off with crime tape. And here are the photos. So here's the first photo. And this is the wooded area with the crime scene tape. It's pretty disturbing to see something like this. I had a friend tell me more about this, that he had a neighbor that had a bit of insight into this, but I'm not going to report it because it's hearsay. I don't want to report what a random neighbor is saying that the police refuse to talk about. But those are pretty alarming. The idea that they would need to be looking in the woods for something related to the case only tells me that the belongings that were missing off Blake's person have something to do with these recent search warrant executions. Obviously, I'm speculating here, but that's my immediate thought, is that somebody was driving down that street at night, or, early in the morning when it was dark, and these completely unrelated people could have had something to do with it. Hence, the idea that's the reason why this case is so cold is because the people involved have no connection, making it a pretty rare instance of a murder case where the suspect has little to nothing to do with the victim. So I will play one last snippet of the Voices for Justice podcast. This is Melissa's theories. So let's listen.
We don't know. We could theorize all day. It feels like there are a lot of possibilities here. But I asked Melissa what she thinks happened to Blake.
I have a couple of different theories. I definitely believe that he was taken. I don't know if he went willingly at first and then realized that he had gotten himself into a bad situation, or if he was immediately taken against his will. Because we all know that he was not murdered at the location that he was found. They never did find the murder scene. They've never recovered any of his personal items. But I believe that whatever did take place, Blake felt he was doing it for a purpose. One of my theories is he was lured out by the ex-girlfriend's stepfather, or Blake did have some friends that were also related to the ex-girlfriend's stepfather, who could have very well, texted him and lured him out, or he was being followed. Either tracked or actually followed. I truly believe in my heart that stepfather had something to do with it. If he didn't do it himself, he had someone do it.
While I don't want to discount Melissa's belief about what happened,
I mean, that's a pretty strong condemnation of the stepfather, and that really goes to show how integral this part of the case is. The part about the stepfather, and why I saved it for after the story, because without that part, the case seems like a random case of, we don't know if he had any enemies. We don't know how anyone outside of the people that knew where he would have been in that moment. how anyone else could have done this. I think people have said that, like, people have said in certain editorials that, why haven't they looked into the friend or the girlfriend or anything like that? And when you have the context of the Jonesboro section of the story, it becomes a little bit more like, there's no way it's not him, right? And yeah, it's just this really weird thing where, like, yeah, they've ruled him out as a suspect. He apparently has a good alibi. But she even just mentioned, like, the whole going no contact with friends. The fact that that was a concern from her in the first place shows that, yeah, I guess it is possible that there are friends that were on the stepfather's side that could have lured him out and carried out the crime themselves under the presumptive orders of the stepfather. Obviously, this is all speculation. I'm not accusing the stepfather of anything. But that section of the story cannot be ignored. It's such a major part. It's like if someone did something to somehow piss someone off, after that incident, they move across the state, and then a few months later, randomly go missing one night and then turn up deceased a couple months later in a place that had already been canvassed. So he had clearly been taken somewhere, then murdered, then brought back. That's... You're not going to then ignore the first part. Even if the police have cleared it, there's a missing link there. There has to be something there. That's too wild of a coincidence. And of all nights, homecoming night. They put huge emphasis on him having a cell phone. And so that also lends, credibility to the theory that it's possible that, like, associates of the stepfather or, like, former friends of Blake's could have found his location through just talking to him.
6:04 now. There are new developments this morning in the case of a Coweta County teenager found dead in a creek more than 12 years ago. You may remember 17-year-old Blake Chappell. He vanished in 2011 after going to his homecoming dance at East Coweta High School. Authorities found his body 2 months later. His killer was never found. This morning, Noonan police say there is new evidence in the case. In fact, officers have now served 3 search warrants in the Sharpsburg area. Detectives collected new evidence that is now in the hands of the GBI for further analysis. As of now, police have not made any arrests, but they're asking anyone with information to please come forward. You can read more about Blake and the search for his killer on 11alive.com. You'll find the story on the home.
So, as of September 1st, almost September 2nd, 2024, that is it. That is all we have. And the Noonan PD offered a $20,000 reward for info, leading to the that'll assist the case anyway. At the time that it was offered, I believe it was the highest amount that the city had ever offered. And that's all we have. It's truly baffling. It's truly baffling that we have nothing. And anytime the police are asked about it, they don't give a lot of info away, presumably because they might have something fairly damning that they can't reveal without the suspect being able to cover their tracks. I guess if they have an idea of who might be behind it, but not enough evidence, they don't want to tip that person off. Yeah, apparently the department declined 11 Alive's request for a medical report. So they won't even release the forensic evidence. Lieutenant Chris Robinson said, as suspects are developed, a lot of details would only be known by those people, so we can't really release too much. He's the lieutenant that took over the case in 2019. He did confirm that through the course of their investigation, it was clear Blake's death was a homicide, but in nearly 10 years, they've never made an arrest. He said, quote, "Everything we've received has been run down and vetted and ruled out at this point. Without community support and people who know something coming forward, it just makes it near impossible to get anywhere right now." And yeah, Blake's phone, wallet, and clothes were never found. And also, so that's what I mentioned it earlier, but his backpack was also missing. So yeah, if you want to leave a tip, you can leave it anonymously if you want. You can leave a tip at the Noonan Police Department at 770-254-2355, or you can contact Crime Stoppers of Greater Atlanta. There is still a $20,000 reward for info leading to an arrest in the case. And you can provide the tip anonymously. And the mother is still pleading with the public on this. I mean, this is not, something that she's just dropped. She's still asking the public for help. And I mean, the Voices for Justice podcast came out January 2022, and I think she's still pleading with the public, and I think even commented on the recent search warrants. The last I heard, she wasn't doing too well, and that makes me so sad that she has the chance of not living long enough to see this case solved. And the longer this case goes unsolved, the harder it's going to be for them to solve it. And, the search warrants was like a huge thing. I remember I have like a thing that notifies me anytime his name is brought up in a news article, pretty much. And the day I read that they executed search warrants for his case, dude, you would have thought I just won the lottery. I was so, I was to the moon. It just makes me so... It makes me so sad that they can't solve this case. And he's just one of 7 major cold cases that the Noonan Police Department has posted about. Carl Smith, Carlos Barber, Reginald Sinkfield, Eric Smith, Mr. Martin, James Petty. All of these guys. I mean, they're all part of unsolved cases as well. We can read their crime reports real quick just to rattle them off, because they're also on the same tip line. You can submit a tip to the same people about them. Carl Smith on the... trying to zoom in. According to his page, the Noonan PD is investigating the murder of 24-year-old Carl Anthony Smith on September 26th, 1997. Officers with the NPD were dispatched to the area of 235 Greenville Street, Noonan, Georgia 30263. former hotspot gas station. Yeah, from what I read, that gas station's been demolished. It's like a tire shop or something now. In reference to a report of a male with severe head injuries. The male was transported to an Atlanta area hospital where he later succumbed to those injuries sustained during the assault. If you have any info regarding his death, please contact them at any of the following methods with the, contact info for all these guys. Let's move on to the next one. Carlos Barber. The NPD is investigating the murder of 28-year-old Carlos Barber. On January 15th, 2003, officers with the NPD were dispatched to 14 Haney Street, Newnan, Georgia, in reference to a report of a deceased individual. Upon further investigation, the male was determined to have suffered from a gunshot wound. Moving on. This is a huge time jump. So, from 2003, it jumps to 2011 for Blake. Then it jumps to 2014. The NPD is investigating the murder of 31-year-old Reginald Lamont Sinkfield. On April 2nd, 2014, the NPD were dispatched to 9 Marianne Street, Newnan, Georgia, in reference to a report of a person shot. A male is determined to have suffered from a gunshot wound and later succumbed to his injuries. Eric Smith. They're investigating the murder of 33-year-old Eric Smith. I'm not too sure on how to pronounce that name. On November 27th, 2015, officers with the NPD were dispatched to 31 Highland Park Drive. In reference to a report of a person shot. Upon further investigation, a male is determined to have suffered from a gunshot wound. And I assume he later succumbed to his injuries, as it doesn't say. Obviously it says he died, but they didn't do the usual wording. The Newnan Police Department is investigating the murder of 18-year-old Squirrel. That's an interesting name. Squirrel Martin. On December 10th, 2015. Wow, these were a month apart. Man. Officers were dispatched to 20 Calhoun Street, Newnan, in reference to a report of a deceased individual. Upon further investigation, the male is determined to have suffered from a gunshot wound. And finally, the last case, the oldest person on this list as well, and the most recent on this list. Investigating the murder of 72-year-old James Lee Petty. On June 11th, 2020, so at the height of the pandemic, they were dispatched to 99 West Washington Street in reference to the report of a deceased individual. He was determined to have suffered from a gunshot wound. So, out of all the cases, Blake's is the only one to occur outside of the downtown Newnan area, from what I've come to find out. Here, let me look up some of these other places. Yeah, I was right. He is pretty much the only individual on this entire list to not die or not go missing in the downtown district of that city. So, I guess that's not entirely true. Where's this one at? No, it's true. Oh man, that's sad. So yeah, that is the case of Blake Chappell. I will leave all my sources in the description. This is a case that I have paid close attention to, and I take it very seriously. And I really hope that it is solved soon. For his mother's sake, I hope it's solved soon. my theories are that, because his last sighting was around 6:30 to 7 a.m. at that gas station. I don't know if I believe that was him that the dude saw. My theory is that Blake went missing around the time that he sent his last text. That is my thought, is that around 5 something in the morning, that's when he was taken. I don't think that he would have made it all the way to that gas station and not gone straight back to Austin's house. I just don't believe that. But, they've said that, I mean, that's the only sighting that has been given any credibility on official timelines. The jacket story is confusing, why he would have left wearing one jacket and ended up with a different one by the time he arrived at Ryan's house. That's one of the weird details that I think is overlooked a lot, to the point where I don't see that detail in a lot of article and timeline retellings of this story. So there's a lot of major inconsistencies on the timeline. I don't know if he would have been spotted at that gas station and then later spotted at a gas station even farther away from his last known sighting, reportedly, and even farther away than the 2 homes that he would have been coming from. Austin's house and Ryan's house are nowhere near that Quick Trip that people claim to have seen him at. I think there was another area that they claimed to see him at that is like completely out of left field. I've never even seen that one listed on anything but that timeline. I've at least seen the Quick Trip thing a few times, and it's even brought up in Voices for Justice. But that would have been around 9:30. I do not think in broad daylight this kid wouldn't have been accurately spotted and last seen, and then he would have been taken, unless he was taken and brought to that Quick Trip with the captors. That's a scenario I can envision. But yeah, I'm curious to know if we'll get any updates on the search warrant part of this story. Knowing my luck, there's going to be an update to this story right before this comes out. But good, honestly. I hope that this is outdated by the time this comes out. I hope we have an answer sooner rather than later. So that's the end of the episode. If you made it this far, thank you for watching. Thank you for listening. Like I said, if you have any info, leave a tip. Leave it anonymously if you have to. So, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. I'll either be back next Friday or in the middle of the week because, I itch to make new episodes like it's nothing. It's the usual. We're on every listening platform. So, anyways, like I said, go leave a tip. Everything will be in the description. And, have a good week. And, stay safe.